The night was unusually quiet, almost too quiet. Officer Daniel Harper sat in his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos as he drove slowly down the empty streets of Willow Creek. The small town rarely saw much trouble, maybe a noise complaint or a lost dog, but tonight felt different. There was an odd heaviness in the air, like the calm before a storm. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. As he turned onto Maple Street, the faint glow of a street lamp caught his attention. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but then he noticed it. A dark shape lying motionless near the edge of the park. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. Was it a pile of trash? A stray animal? Or something worse? Daniel slowed the car and pulled over. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the chilly night air. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots echoed in the silence. As he approached, his heart began to race. It wasn't trash or an animal. It was a boy, crumpled on the ground, unconscious and unmoving. His clothes were dirty and torn, and there was a bruise forming on his pale face. Beside him lay a black duffel bag, partially unzipped. Its presence felt out of place, almost sinister. Daniel knelt beside the boy, checking for signs of life. His pulse was weak but steady, and his breathing shallow. Whoever this kid was, he needed help, and fast. Daniel quickly called for an ambulance, his voice tense as he relayed the situation to dispatch. But as he waited for backup, his eyes kept drifting back to the duffel bag. What was inside? Why had the boy been carrying it? And why was he left here alone? Questions swirled in Daniel's mind, each one more unsettling than the last. He knew he shouldn't touch the bag. It could be evidence, but curiosity gnawed at him. Something about this scene didn't add up. The seconds ticked by agonizingly slow. The only sounds were the distant hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Daniel glanced around, half expecting someone to appear and explain what was going on. But the street remained eerily deserted. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though he saw no one. Finally, unable to resist any longer, Daniel reached for the duffel bag. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it, shining his flashlight inside. What he saw made his stomach drop. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. The contents of the bag weren't just strange. They were alarming. This wasn't just a random accident. Whatever this boy was involved in, it was far bigger and far more dangerous than Daniel could have imagined. The boy stirred faintly as Daniel knelt beside him, his face pale under the harsh beam of the flashlight. His clothes were soaked with dirt and what looked like dried mud, as if he had been dragged through the woods or forced to sleep on the ground. The bruise on his cheekbone was dark and swollen, suggesting he had been hurt recently, perhaps even struck. Daniel's instincts screamed that this wasn't just some runaway kid who had wandered off and collapsed. Something far more sinister was at play. "Hey, can you hear me?" Daniel asked, his voice calm but firm. He gently shook the boy's shoulder, careful not to startle him. There was no response. The boy's breathing was shallow, his body limp. It was clear he was in bad shape. Daniel checked his pockets for identification, hoping to find something, anything that could give him answers. But there was nothing. No wallet, no phone, no clue about who this child was or where he had come from. His eyes drifted back to the black duffel bag lying inches away from the boy's outstretched hand. It was unzipped just enough to reveal a glimpse of its contents, but the dim light made it hard to see clearly. Daniel hesitated. Protocol dictated that he should wait for backup before tampering with potential evidence, but time felt like it was slipping away. Every second counted, not just for the boy's safety, but also for understanding the bigger picture. The distant wail of sirens broke the silence, growing louder as the ambulance approached. Relief washed over Daniel, but it didn't ease the gnawing curiosity in his gut. He glanced at the boy again, then at the bag. Finally, unable to resist any longer, he reached out and carefully opened it wider, shining his flashlight inside. What he saw made his heart stop. Stacks of cash were neatly bundled together, tied with rubber bands. They looked like they had been taken straight out of a movie scene. A small fortune stuffed into the duffel bag. But it wasn't just money. Beneath the cash were several passports, their covers worn but intact. Daniel flipped one open, his hands trembling slightly as he examined it. Each passport bore a different name, a different photo. None of them matched the unconscious boy lying beside him. Except for one. Daniel froze when he found it, a passport with the boy's face staring back at him. But the name printed beneath the photo was unfamiliar. Ethan Carter. Was that his real name? Or another alias? And why did he have so many fake identities? Before Daniel could process what he was looking at, the boy groaned softly, his eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, their eyes met, and Daniel saw fear, pure, raw fear, reflected in the boy's gaze. Don't let them find me," the boy whispered hoarsely, his voice barely audible. Then, as quickly as he had awakened, his eyes rolled back, and he slipped into unconsciousness once more. The sound of tires screeching to a halt signaled the arrival of the ambulance. Paramedics rushed toward them, carrying a stretcher and medical supplies. Daniel stepped aside, his mind racing. Who were they? What had the boy been running from? And why was he carrying a bag full of money and fake passports? As the paramedics loaded the boy onto the stretcher and prepared to transport him to the hospital, Daniel knew one thing for certain. This case was far from ordinary. Whatever secrets the boy was hiding, they were dangerous. And Daniel couldn't afford to look away now. Daniel stood frozen, the beam of his flashlight illuminating the contents of the duffel bag. The stacks of cash were overwhelming enough, but it was the passports that truly unnerved him. Each one seemed to tell a different story, different names, different birth dates, even different countries of origin. Yet among them was one passport with the boy's face, staring back at Daniel like a ghost from another life. It felt surreal, almost impossible to believe. As the paramedics worked around him, loading the unconscious boy into the ambulance, Daniel's mind raced. What kind of child carried fake IDs and large sums of money? Who were they? As the boy had whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness. And why had he been left alone in the middle of the night, injured and vulnerable? The paramedics asked if Daniel wanted to ride along to the hospital, but he declined. He needed time to think, to process what he had just discovered. Before leaving the scene, he carefully secured the duffel bag and placed it in the trunk of his patrol car. Evidence or not, this bag held answers and dangers he couldn't yet comprehend. Back at his vehicle, Daniel leaned against the hood, running a hand through his hair. His instincts told him this wasn't a random case of theft or mischief. This was something far more calculated, far darker. His thoughts drifted to the boy again. Ethan, if that was indeed his real name. There was something haunting about the way he had begged for protection, his voice trembling with fear. Whoever they were, they clearly terrified him. Daniel decided to call Detective Clara Hayes, an old colleague known for her sharp instincts and experience with complex cases. She picked up on the second ring, her tone casual until Daniel explained what he had found. By the time he finished describing the cash, the passports, and Ethan's cryptic warning, Clara's voice had turned serious. "This sounds bigger than you realized, Daniel," she said firmly. "You need to tread carefully. If this involves organized crime, or worse, then you're dealing with people who won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets in their way." Her words sent a chill down Daniel's spine, but they also reinforced his resolve. He couldn't turn away now, not when a child's life was at stake. Still, Clara's warning lingered in his mind. How deep did this go? Were there others involved? And how had Ethan ended up tangled in all of this? By the time Daniel arrived at the hospital, the boy had been rushed into emergency care. A nurse informed him that Ethan was stable but still unconscious. They wouldn't know the full extent of his injuries until morning. Daniel sat in the waiting room, staring at the duffel bag resting beside him. Its presence felt heavy, almost oppressive, as though it carried secrets too dangerous to uncover. For hours, Daniel wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he wanted to protect Ethan, to ensure the boy woke up safe and sound. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the implications of what he had found. This wasn't just about helping a lost child. It was about unraveling a mystery that could put both of them in grave danger. As dawn broke outside the hospital windows, casting soft light into the sterile room, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. No matter where this investigation led, he would see it through. For Ethan, for justice, and for the truth buried within that ominous black duffel bag. The morning sun filtered through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across the sterile hallway where Daniel sat. He hadn't slept all night, his mind replaying fragments of the boy's whispered plea. "Don't let them find me." Those words echoed in his head like a warning, urging him to act, but leaving too many questions unanswered. Who exactly were they? And why was Ethan so afraid? Ethan finally woke up late in the morning, groggy and disoriented. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route before landing on Daniel, who stood near the doorway. For a moment, there was silence, just the faint beeping of monitors and the distant hum of activity from the hospital corridors. "You're safe here," Daniel said gently, stepping closer. "My name is Officer Harper. I found you last night." Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to fear. His small frame tensed under the thin hospital blanket, and his voice trembled when he spoke. "Where's the bag? Did they take it?" Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's secure. No one has touched it except me. But I need to know what's going on, Ethan. Who are they? What happened to you?" Ethan's gaze dropped to his hands, which were clenched tightly together. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them away, trying to stay strong. I can't tell you," he whispered. "If I do, they'll kill us both." Daniel pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, leaning forward slightly to make himself less intimidating. "Listen to me, Ethan. You're not alone anymore. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together. But I need your help. Can you start by telling me how you ended up with that bag?" For several minutes, Ethan remained silent, his face etched with conflict. Finally, he took a shaky breath and began speaking in fragments, his voice barely above a whisper. He explained that he had been taken months ago while walking home from school. A van pulled up beside him, and before he could react, he was grabbed and thrown inside. From that day on, he was moved from place to place, forced to carry bags just like the one Daniel had found. "They never told me what was inside," Ethan admitted, his voice breaking. "Just that I had to keep moving, stay quiet, and never try to run. If I did..." He trailed off, swallowing hard. "They said they'd hurt my family." Daniel felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. This wasn't just a case of exploitation. It was psychological manipulation. Whoever these people were, they had used threats against Ethan's loved ones to ensure his compliance. The boy wasn't just a victim. He was a pawn in something much larger. But last night, Ethan continued, his voice trembling even more. "I couldn't take it anymore. They stopped at some old building and left me alone for a minute. I saw my chance and ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. Then, everything went black." Daniel nodded slowly, piecing together the story. The boy had risked everything to escape, only to collapse in exhaustion, or worse, injury, on the side of the road. It was a miracle Daniel had found him when he did. "Ethan," Daniel said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "You don't have to go back to them. We'll protect you and your family. But I need your trust. Will you work with me to bring these people down?" Ethan hesitated, tears streaming down his face. After a long pause, he gave a slight nod. In that moment, Daniel saw a flicker of hope, a spark of resilience buried beneath layers of fear. Together, they were taking the first step toward unraveling the dangerous web. But Daniel knew the hardest part was yet to come. With Ethan's fragmented testimony as his starting point, Daniel dove headfirst into the investigation. The boy had mentioned being moved from place to place and forced to carry bags filled with unknown contents. The passports in the duffel bag hinted at international connections, while the stacks of cash suggested money laundering or some form of illegal trade. But who was behind it? And how far did their reach extend? Daniel began by examining the passports more closely. Each one bore a different name, but the photos were unmistakably Ethan's. What troubled Daniel most was the quality of the documents. They weren't cheap forgeries. They were expertly crafted, likely costing thousands of dollars each. Whoever had created them had access to sophisticated resources, which pointed to a well-organized operation. The addresses listed on the passports caught his attention next. Most were vague, post office boxes or generic mailing addresses, but one stood out: an address in a nearby city known for its abandoned warehouses and industrial zones. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a lead, and Daniel wasn't about to let it slip away. Before heading out, he contacted Detective Clara Hayes again, updating her on what he'd learned so far. She agreed to meet him at the station later that evening to help sift through the evidence, but she warned him not to act alone. "This isn't your typical case, Daniel," she said firmly. "These people don't play by the rules. If you step wrong, you could end up putting yourself and Ethan in even more danger." Despite her warning, Daniel couldn't shake the urgency building inside him. Every hour wasted was another hour Ethan's captors might use to regroup, or worse, retaliate. He decided to visit the address himself, keeping Clara informed, but acting quickly before any trail went cold. The drive to the industrial zone took longer than expected, the desolate landscape stretching endlessly under a gray afternoon sky. As Daniel pulled up to the address, a crumbling warehouse surrounded by chain-link fences, he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The place looked abandoned, its windows boarded up, and its walls covered in graffiti. Yet something about it felt off, too quiet, too still. He parked a block away and approached cautiously, his hand resting on the grip of his service weapon. The front gate hung slightly ajar, rusted hinges groaning softly in the breeze. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and decay, the floor littered with broken glass and debris. But amidst the chaos, Daniel noticed signs of recent activity: fresh tire tracks in the dirt, discarded food wrappers, and what appeared to be makeshift beds tucked into shadowy corners. His heart pounded as he moved deeper into the warehouse, flashlight cutting through the gloom. In one corner, he found a stack of documents, shipping manifests, invoices, and handwritten notes written in a language he didn't recognize. Nearby, there was surveillance equipment, cameras, wires, and monitors displaying grainy footage of empty streets. Whoever had been here hadn't left willingly. As Daniel snapped photos and gathered evidence, he realized this wasn't just a safe house. It was a hub, a central location used to coordinate movements, launder money, and transport goods or people. His blood ran cold at the thought of Ethan being part of such an operation, forced to serve as a courier without knowing the true nature of what he carried. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside, heavy boots crunching against gravel. Daniel froze, his pulse racing. He wasn't alone. The footsteps grew louder, each crunch of gravel sending a jolt of adrenaline through Daniel's body. He quickly turned off his flashlight, plunging himself into the dim shadows of the warehouse. His breathing slowed as he pressed himself against a stack of crates, trying to make himself invisible. The voices outside were low but unmistakable. Two men, maybe more, speaking in hurried tones. This place was supposed to be clean. One of them growled, frustration lacing his words. Whoever searched it better have covered their tracks. Daniel's mind raced. They knew someone had been here. Had they seen his car? Was he already too late to slip away unnoticed? For now, his only advantage was surprise. They didn't know where he was inside the vast, shadowy space. But that wouldn't last long. The metallic creak of the warehouse door opening sent a chill down his spine. Heavy boots clomped across the floor, and the beam of a flashlight sliced through the darkness. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon, though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting Ethan's story, ensuring the evidence didn't fall back into the wrong hands. "Spread out," another voice commanded, colder and sharper than the first. "Check every corner. If there's anyone here, we deal with them fast." Daniel's heart pounded as he calculated his next move. There was no way out without being spotted, not with multiple armed men sweeping the area. His best chance was to stay hidden until they moved deeper into the warehouse, then slip past them while their attention was divided. But timing would be everything. As the footsteps grew closer, Daniel noticed something glinting on the floor nearby. An old wrench, left behind by whoever had used this place before. It wasn't much, but it might buy him time if things went south. He grabbed it quietly, holding it ready in case he needed a distraction. One of the men paused near Daniel's hiding spot, shining his light over the crates. "You think the kid came back for the bag?" he muttered to his partner. "He's not smart enough to run far." The mention of the kid confirmed what Daniel had feared. These men were connected to Ethan. They weren't just looking for the missing duffel bag. They were hunting him. And if they found Daniel, they'd likely assume he knew where Ethan was. Before the man could investigate further, Daniel acted. With a quick motion, he hurled the wrench across the room, letting it clatter loudly against the far wall. The sound echoed through the cavernous space, drawing immediate attention. Both men spun toward the noise, their flashlights cutting through the dark. What was that? One barked, already moving in the direction of the sound. "Stay sharp," the other snapped, following close behind. Daniel didn't wait for them to realize it was a trick. As soon as they were distracted, he darted in the opposite direction, sticking to the shadows along the walls. His movements were silent, deliberate, every step calculated to avoid detection. He reached the exit just as the men realized they'd been duped. "Over here," one shouted, spinning around and spotting Daniel's retreating figure. "Stop right there." Daniel didn't stop. He burst through the doorway, sprinting toward his car as shouts erupted behind him. Bullets whizzed past, ricocheting off metal and concrete, but he kept running, fueled by sheer determination. Reaching his vehicle, he yanked open the door and slid inside, slamming it shut just as another shot pinged against the hood. With tires screeching, Daniel sped away, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. Behind him, the men stood at the edge of the lot, watching him disappear into the distance. Though he had escaped, for now, he knew this wasn't over. These men were dangerous, desperate, and willing to do whatever it took to protect their operation. And Daniel had just become a target. Back at the station, he called Clara immediately, explaining what had happened. Her voice was tense but resolute. "You've poked a hornet's nest, Daniel," she said. "But you're not doing this alone anymore. We'll bring them down. Together." By the time Daniel returned to the station, his hands were still trembling from the adrenaline rush. He recounted every detail of the encounter at the warehouse to Detective Clara Hayes, who listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing with each revelation. The evidence Daniel had gathered, the shipping manifests, surveillance equipment, and Ethan's testimony, painted a chilling picture. An international smuggling ring operating under the radar, using children like Ethan as unwitting couriers. Clara wasted no time. She called in reinforcements, bringing in a team of trusted officers to analyze the documents and trace the addresses linked to the passports. Meanwhile, she insisted on meeting Ethan personally. "If we're going to take these people down," she told Daniel, "we need him to trust us completely. That means showing him he's not just another pawn." Ethan was nervous when they entered his hospital room. His face lit up slightly at the sight of Daniel, but clouded over with apprehension when Clara introduced herself. "I'm here to help," she said gently, pulling up a chair beside his bed. "But I need you to be honest with me, Ethan. Can you do that?" For a moment, Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering between the two detectives. Then, slowly, he nodded. Over the next hour, Clara coaxed more details from him. Names he'd overheard, places he'd been taken, routines he'd observed during his captivity. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start connecting dots. One name stood out repeatedly: Victor, a man Ethan described as tall, with a scar running down his cheek, who always seemed to be in charge. As Clara pieced together Ethan's fragmented memories, Daniel worked tirelessly to track down leads. Using the information from the passports and shipping manifests, they identified several key locations tied to the operation. What shocked them most was the scope of the network. Not only were they laundering money, but there were also indications of human trafficking, with victims being moved across borders under the guise of legitimate travel. The breakthrough came when Clara cross-referenced one of the addresses with recent criminal activity reports. A property in a neighboring state matched the description: a sprawling compound known for suspicious comings and goings. Surveillance footage confirmed their suspicions: armed guards patrolling the perimeter, unmarked vans arriving late at night, and individuals escorted inside against their will. "We can't handle this alone," Clara admitted, pacing the cramped office as Daniel reviewed the findings. "This is bigger than local law enforcement. We need federal backup." But contacting the authorities wasn't straightforward. When Daniel reached out to a federal task force specializing in organized crime, their response was lukewarm at best. They promised to look into it, but warned that without concrete proof tying the operation directly to illegal activities, they couldn't act immediately. Daniel sensed reluctance and possibly interference, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. Every delay put Ethan and countless others at risk. Determined to gather irrefutable evidence, Daniel and Clara devised a bold plan. With Ethan's permission, they recorded his full testimony, capturing every harrowing detail of his ordeal. They also planted GPS trackers on the vehicles linked to the smuggling ring, monitoring their movements closely. The goal was simple yet perilous: expose the operation from the inside while keeping Ethan safe. Through it all, Ethan wrestled with guilt. "I should have fought harder," he muttered one evening, tears streaming down his face. "I let them use me." Daniel knelt beside him, his voice firm but kind. "You survived, Ethan. That's what matters. Survival isn't betrayal, it's strength. Now, it's our turn to fight for you." With renewed resolve, Ethan agreed to cooperate fully, knowing his courage could bring justice not only for himself, but for others trapped in the shadows. Together, Daniel, Clara, and Ethan prepared for the final showdown, a confrontation that would either dismantle the syndicate or put them all in unimaginable danger. The courtroom was packed, the air tense with anticipation. Ethan sat at the center of it all, his small frame dwarfed by the heavy wooden chair he occupied. Beside him, Daniel and Clara stood like steadfast guardians, their presence a quiet reassurance that he wasn't alone. For weeks, they had prepared for this moment, collecting evidence, securing witness testimonies, and building an ironclad case against the syndicate. Now, it was time to face the people who had turned Ethan's life into a nightmare. On the other side of the room, Victor, the man with the jagged scar, and several of his accomplices sat stoically, their faces masks of indifference. They exuded arrogance, as if confident no one could touch them. But today, that confidence would be shattered. As Ethan took the stand, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on him. His hands trembled as he clutched the railing, but his voice remained steady when he began to speak. He recounted every harrowing detail: how he'd been kidnapped, forced to carry bags filled with illegal goods, and threatened into silence. The scars on his wrists and the bruises on his body told a story words couldn't fully capture. Victor's lawyer tried to rattle him, firing questions meant to discredit his testimony. "Isn't it true," the attorney sneered, "that you willingly participated in these activities? That you knew exactly what you were doing?" Ethan flinched but didn't falter. "I didn't have a choice," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. They told me they'd hurt my family if I didn't do what they said. I was just trying to survive. The jury watched intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to empathy. Daniel exchanged a glance with Clara, both silently acknowledging the strength Ethan was showing. This wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming his dignity. The turning point came when Clara presented the evidence they had gathered. Surveillance footage showed unmarked vans arriving at the compound late at night, carrying individuals who looked visibly distressed. Bank records revealed millions funneled through fake accounts linked to the smugglers. And then there was the duffel bag, the same one Daniel had found beside Ethan, that tied everything together. It was impossible to deny the operation's existence now. By the end of the trial, even Victor's smug demeanor had cracked. As the judge delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts, a wave of relief washed over the courtroom. Cheers erupted from the gallery, where Ethan's parents sat, tears streaming down their faces. They had feared they would never see their son again, yet here he was, finally free. Afterward, Daniel found Ethan outside the courthouse, staring up at the sky as though seeing it for the first time. "You did good," Daniel said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Real good." Ethan smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in his eyes. "It doesn't feel real," he admitted. "Like I've been running for so long, I don't know how to stop." "You don't have to figure it out all at once," Daniel replied. "Take it one day at a time. You're safe now. That's what matters." In the weeks that followed, Ethan began healing. With therapy and support from his family, he started piecing his life back together. Meanwhile, Daniel and Clara were hailed as heroes, not just for solving the case, but for giving a voice to those who had none. The syndicate's takedown sent shockwaves through organized crime networks, dismantling a dangerous operation and saving countless lives. For Daniel, the case became more than just another badge on his record. It reminded him why he had chosen this path: to protect, to serve, and to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And for Ethan, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of brighter days ahead.